Our number one goal with our learners is that they make progress and become as independent and happy as possible. So, how can we make sure to choose meaningful goals to help our learners succeed?
Hi, I'm Shira.
And I'm Shayna.
We're behavior analysts who create weekly content about how to teach kids with autism so that they make real progress. And we create shareable resources to make your job just a little easier. Today's topic is all about choosing meaningful goals. And if you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on new video releases.
So, when I was in high school, I had to memorize Shakespeare. Who else had to do that? Anyways, I still remember a lot of the words to Juliet's famous, what do you call it? Famous
Soliloquy.
soliloquy. Wow, there's a good word. Oh Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? Deny thy father, refuse thy name. What good is that going to do me in real life? I can say that, and hey, I guess I just used it on our podcast, so it did do me something. But again, you got to question, what are the meaningful goals that we're teaching our learners, and where is it going to get them in the future?
Yeah, my kids feel the same way about Shakespeare, and I don't really have any argument because they're right. It's not so meaningful and important in their lives to learn Shakespeare, but we get to choose the goals that our learners have. And so it's important to think about what makes it a meaningful goal.
You know that we're going to get a bunch of English teachers who are going to be talking about us in the comments, right?
Yeah, no hate from the English world.
Please. Anyway, with our code of ethics, the BACB's code of ethics 2.13, if anyone's interested, basically talks about assessments. And it states that before designing any type of behavior change intervention, that as behavior analysts, we must implement an assessment.
However, like we've kind of taken that a little far. And while we have some amazing assessments that should be used as tools, they should not be used as curriculum. Sometimes assessments take the place of curriculum and we look at it and say, well, because we didn't fill in this box right here, that means that this box is going to become a teaching program. And then we're working very specifically on, receptive labels by function, which is a very specific goal. But we forget to look at the big picture. And the purpose of assessments is really just to give us an idea of where the student's skills are right now, give us a bit of a baseline and a bit of an idea of tracking progress. And that's it. Put that assessment away.
The other part that some people forget is that, okay, we have to implement an assessment, but it can be any assessment. So, you know what, I might implement, I mean, I don't think I would, but somebody could implement, say, a VV map on an 18-year-old and go, okay, well, I did an assessment, so I check off that box of my ethics. But no, the ethics code also says that we need to implement assessments with a focus on maximizing benefits and minimizing risk of harm to clients and stakeholders. So an assessment needs to drive, it doesn't have to be curriculum, but it should drive programming in the fact that if I'm doing a VB map on an 18-year-old, well, the 18-year-old may have mastered all those skills, so it's not the right assessment. Or the assessment isn't appropriate because it has a whole bunch of like playing with beginner toys, and an 18-year-old, it's not appropriate for an 18-year-old to do that necessarily. So we really have to look at, what kinds of assessments can we use? And as behavior analysts, I feel like we get caught up in like, oh, well, there's, two or three main assessments, so we must use one of these, even though it doesn't quite fit with our learner. And that's not the case.
So we actually have a whole CU on assessments and our approach to assessments, which you should definitely go check out. But the purpose of an assessment, not a paper and pencil type of thing, but getting to know a student is a bit of a different process. You should really just get to know your client, get to know the family. You may fill in one of those paper and pencil or electronic assessments to give you a baseline, but the idea is that you're getting a feel for what kind of skills does this student need in the long run? What's important to the family? What can I tell from my interactions with them? Like, what kind of relationship are we building? And that's going to give you a lot more information about the types of goals you want to put in place than, a paper and pencil assessment.
The other thing that, excuse me, the other thing that I've noticed is that sometimes people will go in and try and do an assessment before they even know a student. So, okay, great, I've met the student for 5 minutes. I'm going to take an 18-page assessment and I'm going to make sure I'm doing this. And I need to do it because I need to get the programming done. And I get the piece of we need to get programming in faster than not, because of course, like if you're taking too long to do an assessment, then you may be doing harm to a client because you're not teaching. But at the same time, if you don't know a student, you can't expect a student to perform well on an assessment. So we really do need to make sure that the student has some type of relationship with us, even if it's, hey, how are you? I brought your favorite toys and let's play with these and interact. And really making sure that the student is in a place of what we would call HRE, like that they're happy, they're relaxed, they're engaged, before we're putting demand on them. Because we want the student to look at us and go, oh, Shayna, Shira, or whoever, you're the giver of good things, not, oh, I just met you and now you're placing all this demand on me and I don't want to do this. So I don't like you and I'm not going to. That's not going to get you very far.
So our version of an assessment is very different. It's much faster. We would say we spend about an hour or two kind of getting to know the family, getting to know the student, and maybe filling in, a basic checklist of where the student's skills are. And then from there, we want to choose goals. And the goals that we're going to choose are going to be what is meaningful for the student. And it's having those conversations with the family and understanding what kind of skills the student is going to need in 3 years from now, in 5 years from now. Sometimes there will be a focus on academics because they really can go the school and academic route and they're really strong in that. And sometimes we need to know very quickly if there has to be a stronger focus on building their independence and the life skills and communication. Communication should always be a part of it. But thinking of the full picture, sometimes we get a little bit focused on, the flashcard component of the program, which we can do 10 hours a week of, and forget to think about the dressing and the eating and the toileting skills that are so important. And we have to think about what's going to be so meaningful for this learner and this family in 5 years from now.
And that's a huge thing is saying, and for the family. A lot of times, we say, okay, well, here's, blinders on. Here's what I want to work on with this student. I've got all of these ideas, but they may not be functional for the family, or they may not be the family's first or second or even third priority. So we really do need to make sure that we are working with the family to create these goals. So they're not just the goals you create and the family has to sign off on them because they have to or they're not getting services. It's about, hey, mom, dad, caregiver, sister, brother, whatever. What are your goals? Let's see if we can implement them. And you know what? Some of the goals may not be very realistic. And that's when you have the conversation with the family. But a lot of the goals you'll find are very realistic. And, if you can implement that and teach the student a few of those goals, they're really big priorities for the parents. That is massive. I mean, I had a student one time and I asked what a parent goal was. And one of the parents' goals was this, I want my child to hug me. And that was it. And we just taught the student how to give a hug, and it just was so powerful for mom. I mean, we could question like, does the student really need to give a hug and all of that kind of stuff? But we taught them to hug and only mom, and it was just so meaningful for mom. So you really do need to make sure that you're taking into account the entire family.
Yeah, also because it might not be so important for the learner. Like they may be happy having somebody bathe them and shower them and dress them, but a lot of our students are going to need long-term caregiving or support. And it's going to make a really big difference to the person supporting them if that student is more independent. So really taking their needs into account as well as the learners.
Absolutely. And, we're looking at, be a team player as well. So not just asking family goals, but also asking, if there's any other team members, like whether it's teachers or speech pathologists, occupational therapists, other people, what are you doing with the student and what's currently been done, what has been done in the past, and taking into consideration everybody's approach so that we can work in a multidisciplinary team.
Also ask the learner if they
Yeah,
can, they could participate in setting their own goals.
absolutely.
They could definitely have a say. And I love the idea of incorporating them into the conversation. If they can verbalize that and be part of that conversation, great. If not, at least incorporate their preferences and their interests and teach them in the way that they would want to learn. So, not teaching them to be a certain way or to fit into a certain, type of student that we might think they may need to be. But if they're really into Lego, like let's just get into Lego. If they're really into superheroes, like let's do more with that. We're trying to help them be the best versions of themselves. So always incorporating their preferences.
When I was younger, I used to think, okay, so let's look at the students' strengths and weaknesses, and we'll always teach to the weaknesses. And that was the approach we took for years. And we read about today's ABA, Gregory Hanley, but we also just have evolved as a field. Thank goodness. And instead of saying, okay, the student is really strong at Lego, we don't need to teach that. Let's look at go, wow, the student's really strong at Lego. How can we foster that and get more creative with the Lego and teach them other skills based on the Lego? And then all of a sudden, our students are architects. Okay, I made a couple big leaps there, but possibly. So really, like not only identifying what their weaknesses are, and yes, we have to teach to some of those, but also, like Shira said, really identifying those individual strengths and preferences and interests, and building on that so that we can have one of those goals is, yeah, our learners are happy because they're doing what they love.
Something that I love that Dr. Peter Gerhardt talks about is that choosing goals in preschool, because adulthood begins in preschool. So even as young as 3 and 5 years old, choosing goals that are going to affect their long-term development and independence. So even though we think that at 3 and 5 they should be sorting shapes and identifying colors and all those really good pre-academic skills, we could also be working on transitions and toileting and hygiene and feeding, because it may take our students a lot longer to get up to somewhat of an age norm for any of those skills, and it's going to really affect their independence and their development. So,
And I was going to say, and their dignity,
yeah.
right? If they're going to a group home or if they're going anywhere and they're not independent with areas like dressing and hygiene, and they need someone else to do it for them, I mean, that affects their dignity.
So what we do after we, speak to the family, fill in a brief checklist, get to know the student a little bit, is we kind of take a step back and then we look at our program planning matrix and we look at all of the different domains that we could possibly address. And we try to choose goals from each domain. And when I say choose goals, I really mean create them. So if we're looking at the life skills domain, we may think about the student and say, wow, they really need to have a bedtime routine because that's really going to help them. And then we're looking at the language domain and we say, they could really start demanding and asking for things verbally. And then we're not pulling it from the assessment that we've written, but we're thinking about the student when we're looking at this big picture. And so we're looking at domains across communication, life skills, social skills, academic, behavior. All of these things are important, and we have to take that all into consideration. And thinking about not just focusing too much on one area, which can be easy to do, but thinking about the whole picture and the whole student.
Our free membership has our assessment that we've done based on research and the program planning matrix, like Shira said, and also a parent intake form. So if you're not already a member of either the free resource or our monthly membership, go check that out because it's free. You can download it and you can take a look at what we're talking about.
And the other thing when you're choosing those goals is it's really important to teach them across operants. We don't just want to isolate receptive language goals from, tacting goals from intraverbal goals, because so much learning has to happen naturally and realistically. And so we do a lot of like generalization and natural environment teaching, but also teaching across operants. So instead of just teaching receptive labels and then going into expressive labels, we could teach that all together, and we could teach them their most preferred labels first. So and then we could play with those things. Then we could talk about those things. So making it not super isolated by operant, but teaching all across operants and then bringing it into real life so that it's meaningful.
We have another video on creating practical ABA programs, so go check that out in terms of just choosing meaningful goals.
For more information on how to choose meaningful goals, click the link on or around this video or in the description to join the CEU event. We also encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos, and leave a like and comment below if you have further questions.